When my daughter Amelia died in my arms at 36, I never imagined the real pain would begin at her own funeral. That's when the man who abandoned her 9 years ago showed up dressed in black, demanding the $25 million she left me. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. My name is Henry Carter. I'm 65 years old, and for the last 6 months, I lived through the greatest hell of my life, watching cancer slowly take my only daughter, Amelia. She was my everything since her mother passed away when she was just 15. I raised her alone, worked day and night to give her the best education, and I was filled with pride when she became a successful entrepreneur with her own chain of fashion stores in River City and Coast City. On February 15th, 2023, Amelia called me into her hospital room. Her eyes, which once shone with determination, now reflected the serenity of someone who knows the end is near. "Dad," she said, her voice weak but firm, "I need you to know something very important. I've been getting everything ready for you." She handed me a sealed envelope with documents that would change my life forever. When I opened that envelope at home that night, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Amelia had amassed a fortune of $25 million through her businesses and investments. In her will drafted with James Lawson, our trusted family lawyer, she named me as her sole universal heir. "Dad, you were a father and a mother to me. No one else deserves what I built with so much effort." She had written this in a personal letter that came with the documents. Amelia passed away on February 22nd, 2023 at 5:30 in the morning. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. In that moment, I felt a part of my soul leave with her. The next few days were a blur of pain paperwork and funeral preparations. On February 25th, the day of the funeral, the Street St. Mary's Church was filled with family, friends, and Amelia's business partners. I was in the front row, devastated by grief, when someone touched my shoulder. When I turned, I saw a tall man about 45 years old, dressed in an elegant black suit and tie, with tears streaming down his cheeks. "Henry," he said with a broken voice. "I'm Ethan Hayes. I'm so sorry for the loss of our dear Amelia." For a moment, I didn't react. Our dear Amelia. This man had the nerve to show up after 9 years of total abandonment and speak as if he had been a part of my daughter's life. Ethan had been Amelia's husband for just 3 years, from 2011 to 2013. When she told him she was pregnant in December 2013, he disappeared overnight, leaving her alone with their marriage debts and a pregnancy that sadly ended in a miscarriage due to the stress. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" I asked in a low voice, trying to keep my composure in that sacred place. "I came to say goodbye to the woman I loved," he answered, drying his tears with a white handkerchief. "Amelia and I had our problems, but she was always special to me." What angered me the most was watching how he acted in front of the other attendees. He positioned himself in the second row, just behind me, sobbing theatrically. Several people who didn't know the story approached him to offer comfort, thinking he was the grieving widower hour. He even went up to the casket during the final farewell, placed his hand on the wooden surface, and murmured something I couldn't hear. After the church service, we headed to Pineview Cemetery. The entire way, Ethan stayed close to the family, as if he had every right to be there. His behavior seemed increasingly strange and calculated. It wasn't the genuine grief of someone who had lost a loved one, but something more artificial. As they lowered the casket, Ethan approached me again. "Henry, we need to talk after this. There are important things we need to discuss about Amelia and, well, about the future." Those words sent a chill down my spine. The future. What future was a man talking about who had abandoned my daughter at the hardest moment of her life? In that instant, I knew Ethan hadn't come to the funeral just to say goodbye. He had other plans, and something told me they were not going to be good for Amelia's memory or for the peace I so desperately needed in that moment of pain. After the burial, while the other guests headed to the reception at my sister Clara's house, Ethan waited for me by his black Mercedes. His attitude had completely changed. He was no longer faking the theatrical grief from the funeral. Now he wore a calculating smile that set my nerves on edge. "Henry, I think it's time we spoke frankly," he said, lighting a cigarette. "Amelia was legally my wife, and under state law I have rights to her estate. I was frozen. Writes this miserable excuse for a man thought he could show up after a decade of total silence and claim what Amelia had built with her own sweat and sacrifice. Ethan, you and my daughter divorced in September 2013. You have no right to anything, I replied, staying calm even though I was boiling with rage inside. Ah, but that's where you're wrong, he said with that arrogant smile. I've been doing some research, and it turns out Amelia never correctly finalized all the divorce paperwork. Technically, we were still married in certain legal aspects. My lawyers have confirmed that I can claim at least half of those $25 million she accumulated. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This scoundrel had been planning this for a while. He knew about Amelia's fortune and had come like a vulture to claim his share of the loot. How dare you, I yelled, losing my composure for the first time. You abandoned my daughter when she needed you most. You left her alone, pregnant and drowning in debt. You disappeared like a coward. And now, after 9 years, you come here talking about rights. Ethan threw his cigarette on the ground and looked at me coldly. Look, Henry, I understand you're hurting, but feelings don't change the law. Amelia built that business empire. Yes, but when we were a couple, I also contributed to the start of her business. I have documents to prove it. It was a lie, and I knew it. Amelia had started her first store in 2015, 3 years after the divorce, with a loan that I myself helped her secure. Ethan never invested a single dollar in my daughter's dreams. Listen to me carefully, he continued in a threatening voice. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you give me my share voluntarily, let's say $12 million, we can avoid a long and costly legal process that will tarnish Amelia's memory in every newspaper in the country. There it was, the true face of Ethan Hayes. He wasn't just an opportunist, but also a blackmailer willing to use my deceased daughter's good name to get money. Are you threatening me? I asked, stepping closer to him. No, I'm offering you a civilized solution. But if you'd rather the media finds out that the father of the successful entrepreneur Amelia Carter is denying her widower hour his rightful inheritance. He let the sentence hang in the air. At that moment, I vividly remembered the day Ethan left Amelia. It was December 28th, 2013. Amelia called me at 10 at night, crying, telling me she had come home to find a note on the kitchen table. I'm gone. This isn't working. Don't try to contact me. That was it. He didn't even have the courage to say goodbye in person or explain why he was running away when she needed support the most. In the following weeks, Amelia discovered that Ethan had emptied their joint bank account, taking $10,000 that were her savings to invest in her future business. He also left unpaid bills for the apartment they shared, forcing Amelia to take on debts she hadn't created. The most painful part was when Amelia lost the baby in February 2013. She tried to contact Ethan to tell him about the tragedy, but he had changed his phone number and blocked her on all social media. My daughter had to go through the grief of losing her child and her marriage at the same time all alone. You know what, Ethan, I said with a calmness I didn't know I had. You're right about one thing. This can be done the easy way or the hard way. But I assure you, if you try to tarnish my daughter's name with your lies, I will show you exactly what I'm capable of. Ethan let out a sarcastic laugh. Are you trying to scare me, old man? I'm 45 and you're 65. Besides, I have resources and connections you can't even imagine. My offer is on the table. $12 million now or $16 million after the trial, plus all the legal fees it will cost me to destroy your reputation. Get out of here before I do something I'll regret, I warned him. You have 1 week to think about it, he said, getting into his Mercedes. Next Monday you'll receive the legal documents. I hope you reconsider your position because this is just getting started. As I watched his car drive away, I felt a mix of rage and determination I hadn't felt in years. This man thought he could take advantage of the pain of a father who had just lost his daughter, but he had picked the wrong person. Amelia had taught me to fight for what is right, and that was exactly what I was going to do. That night, in the solitude of my home, surrounded by photos of Amelia from her childhood to her final days, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to give Ethan a single cent, and I would do everything in my power to expose his true intentions before the law. The day after my encounter with Ethan, I decided to start my own investigation. I couldn't just sit around waiting for his legal threats. If this man had planned everything so precisely, I needed to find out what else he was hiding. My first stop was the office of James Lawson, the lawyer who had drafted Amelia's will. James, a 50-year-old man with over 25 years of experience in inheritance law, saw me that morning in his office on Central Boulevard. "Henry, I am so sorry for your loss," he said as he reviewed the documents Amelia had signed. "I want you to know that your daughter's will is absolutely ironclad. She was very specific in her instructions and was in full command of her mental faculties when we drafted it. James, I need you to investigate Ethan Hayes. He says he has rights to Amelia's inheritance, but I know he's lying." James took notes as I recounted the conversation from the cemetery. "Let me check the divorce files. If I remember correctly, Amelia was very clear about ensuring all legal ties were completely severed." While James looked into the legal aspects, I decided to contact Olivia Reed, who had been Amelia's personal assistant for the last 4 years. Olivia knew my daughter's movements and contacts better than anyone. We met that afternoon at a coffee shop near Amelia's offices in the downtown area. Olivia, a woman of 30, had always been loyal and discreet, but that day I saw she was nervous and restless. "Mr. Carter, there's something I need to tell you about Ethan," she said, constantly looking around as if she were afraid of being overheard. "For the last 2 months, that man has been trying to get close to Amelia." "What do you mean, get close?" I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. "Last November, he started calling the office asking for Amelia. At first, he used fake names, but I recognized his voice because Amelia had told me about him years ago. When I told Miss Amelia, she asked me to hang up on him immediately if he ever called again." Olivia continued to reveal details that made my blood run cold. In December, Ethan showed up at the offices in person. Amelia wasn't there because she had started her chemotherapy, but he insisted on talking to me. He asked me about the company's financial situation, how many stores we had, if Amelia had any partners or investors. And what did you tell him? Nothing, of course. But he kept pushing. He offered me $1,000 just to confirm if Amelia was as successful as the newspapers said. I obviously threw him out of the office, but later I found out he had been asking the same questions at the bank where Amelia had her main accounts. This confirmed my suspicions. Ethan hadn't shown up at the funeral by chance or out of any genuine love for Amelia. He had been preparing this scheme for months, researching my daughter's financial situation while she was battling cancer. "Olivia, do you have any proof of these approaches?" "Yes, Mr. Carter. Amelia asked me to record all office calls after Ethan's first contact. I have the recordings saved on my personal computer." Those words were music to my ears. If Ethan had admitted his true intentions during those calls, we would have solid evidence of his opportunistic behavior. The next day, Olivia brought me the recordings on a USB drive. Listening to them at home, I felt a mix of astonishment and disgust. In one of the recordings from January 15th, Ethan clearly said, "Look, Olivia, I know Amelia is sick. I just want to know if it's worth trying for a reconciliation. You understand what I mean? I'm not going to waste my time if she has nothing to offer me." In another recording from February 8th, Ethan was even more explicit. "I've heard that Amelia has several million stashed away. If that's true, I think we could resolve our past issues. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially when there's so much money on the line." But the most revealing recording was from February 20th, just 2 days before Amelia's death. Ethan had called asking directly about the will. "Do you know if Amelia has made a will? Because technically, if we're still married under some legal provision, I would have automatic rights to her estate." Now I understood Ethan's plan completely. He had been monitoring Amelia's illness, waiting for the moment of her death to appear as the grieving husband and claim the inheritance. It was a plan as cruel as it was calculated. That same evening, I received another crucial piece of information through Samuel Brooks, an old colleague with contacts in the financial sector. Samuel confirmed that Ethan was indeed in serious financial trouble. "Henry, I've asked around discreetly about Ethan Hayes. The man is completely broke. He lost his consulting firm in 2021 due to bad crypto investments. He also has gambling debts at several River City casinos totaling over $50,000. The loan sharks are pressuring him, and according to my contacts, he's desperate to get money fast. Everything fit perfectly. Ethan wasn't just an opportunist, but a desperate man who saw Amelia's death as his only financial salvation. He had bet his future on getting that inheritance, and that's why he was so confident in his legal threats. With all this information, I called James to schedule an urgent meeting. We had solid evidence of Ethan's fraudulent character, but we needed to prepare a solid legal strategy before he followed through on his threat to start the legal process. On Friday night, as I was organizing all the documents and recordings, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but when I answered, I immediately recognized Ethan's voice. Henry, I hope you've reconsidered my offer. On Monday, I'm filing the papers at the courthouse, and I assure you it will be much more expensive for you. Last chance, 12 million, and we're all happy. Ethan, I replied firmly, I think you're the one who should reconsider your position. I've discovered some very interesting things about your true intentions. There was a long silence before he answered. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm warning you don't play games with me. I have resources and contacts that can make your life very complicated. We'll see who has the better hand in this game, I said before hanging up. That night, for the first time since Amelia's death, I slept peacefully. I knew the legal battle ahead would be intense, but now I had the weapons necessary to defend my daughter's legacy and unmask the true intentions of this opportunist. On March 1st, 2023, just as he had promised, Ethan followed through on his threat. At 10 in the morning, a courier knocked on my door, handing me an official envelope from the River City Civil Court. Opening it, I found a 50-page lawsuit where Ethan claimed not only the $25 million, but also damages for malicious concealment of marital assets. His legal argument was twisted but seemingly well-structured. He alleged that during his marriage to Amelia between 2011 and 2013, they had established a business collaboration that was never formally dissolved. He also claimed that Amelia had used business ideas and contacts he had provided during their relationship to build her business empire. The most outrageous part was the list of witnesses Ethan presented to support his version. Names I didn't recognize. People who could supposedly confirm his involvement in Amelia's initial project. It was clear he had been preparing this sham for a long time. I immediately called James to schedule an emergency meeting. When I arrived at his office that afternoon, I found him meticulously reviewing every page of the lawsuit with a serious expression. Henry, I'm not going to lie to you. Ethan has hired Nathan Hale, one of the most aggressive inheritance lawyers in River City. He's known for winning complicated cases using legal technicalities and media pressure. What does that mean for us? I asked. Feeling worry creep over me. It means they're going to play dirty. Hale has a reputation for leaking information to the press to create public pressure on his opponents. We'll probably see articles in the papers about the selfish father denying the successful entrepreneur's widower hour his inheritance. James was right. The next day, the tabloid paper The Urban Times published an article titled "The Million Dollar Battle for Amelia Carter's Inheritance Justice, or Family Greed." The article, clearly biased in Ethan's favor, presented a completely distorted version of the facts. According to the publication, Ethan was a successful entrepreneur who had sacrificed his own career to support his wife's dreams and was now being unfairly excluded from the fruits of their marital collaboration. The article included a photo of Ethan dressed in mourning at the funeral with a caption that read, "The pain of a husband fighting for justice." That same week, while James prepared our legal response, I dedicated myself to finding more evidence of Ethan's true character. Olivia had mentioned that Amelia kept all her personal documents in a safe in her private office, and that she had left me the combination in case of an emergency. When I opened the safe, I found a treasure trove of information. Amelia had been meticulous in saving all correspondence related to her divorce, including emails Ethan had sent her in 2013 when he left the marriage. In an email dated January 15, 2013, Ethan wrote, "Amelia, I need you to understand that this isn't working. I'm not ready to be a father, and frankly, your obsession with opening a business seems like a childish fantasy. I've decided to move to Coast City to start over. Don't try to contact me." Another email from February 3, 2013 was even more revealing. "I've emptied the joint account because I need that money to get established. Consider it my compensation for the 3 years I wasted in this marriage. I hope you find a way to pay the apartment debts without involving me. But the most valuable document was a handwritten letter that Amelia had drafted for her lawyer in September 2013 during the divorce proceedings. In it, she systematically detailed all of Ethan's manipulations and abandonment. My husband, Ethan Hayes, abandoned me on December 28, 2013, upon learning of my pregnancy. In the following weeks, he emptied our joint bank account, taking $10,000, which were my personal savings. When I lost the baby in February due to stress, I tried to contact him to inform him, but he had blocked all means of communication. I formally request that the divorce decree states that Ethan waives any future rights to my assets or income. This letter was notarized and had full legal weight. It was the definitive proof that Ethan had voluntarily waived all rights to Amelia's estate. Armed with this evidence, I returned to James's office with renewed confidence. When I showed him the documents, his expression changed completely. "Henry, this is pure gold," he said with a smile. "This notarized letter proves not only Ethan's voluntary abandonment, but also his explicit waiver of future rights. Any judge with half a brain will dismiss his lawsuit immediately." But James also warned me about the tactics we could expect. Hale will try to discredit these documents. He'll say Amelia was emotionally distraught during the divorce or that circumstances have changed. He'll also try to prove that Ethan contributed in some way to Amelia's subsequent success. To strengthen our case, James suggested we find people who had known Ethan during his marriage to Amelia to testify. "We need witnesses who can confirm his abandonment and his lack of support for your daughter's business projects." I then remembered Grace Evans, Amelia's best friend since college. Grace had been a direct witness to my daughter's suffering during the divorce and knew the circumstances of Ethan's abandonment perfectly. When I contacted Grace, she immediately offered to testify in our favor. "Mr. Carter, I was with Amelia the day Ethan left her. I'll never forget how she cried that night, telling me she felt betrayed not just as a wife, but as a person. That man is a coward, and he can't show up now claiming rights he voluntarily gave up." Grace also provided me with additional information about Ethan that I didn't know. During their marriage, Ethan never showed any interest in Amelia's business plans. On the contrary, he always ridiculed them, telling her it was a waste of time. He even forbade her from using her personal savings for the business consulting she wanted to hire. With all these elements, James began drafting our response to the lawsuit. But before filing it, we decided to take a strategic step that would put Ethan in a very uncomfortable position. Henry James said, "We're going to ask the court to require Ethan to present documentary evidence of his supposed contribution to Amelia's business success. If he really participated in creating her fortune, he must have contracts, invoices, investment records. We know he doesn't have them, but forcing him to try to produce them will reveal the fraudulent nature of his claim." That night, as I reviewed all the documents we had collected one more time, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. Amelia had been an extraordinary woman who built her success despite betrayals and abandonment. My duty as a father was to protect her legacy from the clutches of those who only saw her death as an opportunity for easy enrichment. While James was preparing our legal response, Olivia contacted me with information that would completely change the course of our case. She asked me to meet her at her apartment on a Thursday night, assuring me she had something explosive to show me. When I arrived at her place in Green Park, Olivia seemed nervous but determined. "Mr. Carter, after our last conversation, I remembered something important. Amelia didn't just ask me to record Ethan's phone calls. She also installed a recording system in her personal office after his first in-person meeting with him." Olivia turned on her laptop and showed me a folder full of audio files. Amelia was very cautious. When Ethan showed up in December asking about her finances, she suspected he would try something later, so she decided to record any future meetings she might have with him. "Were there more meetings?" I asked, feeling like I was about to discover something crucial. "Yes, Mr. Carter. 2 meetings that Amelia never told anyone about, not even you. Ethan visited her in her office on January 28th, and again on February 14th, just a week before she passed away. Olivia played the first recording from January 28th. Hearing Amelia's voice weak but firm, a lump formed in my throat. It was obvious she was already very sick, but she maintained her dignity. "Ethan, what do you want after all these years?" I could hear Amelia say. "Amelia, I know you're sick, and I know you've been very successful financially. I think it's time we resolved our past issues, Ethan replied in a syrupy voice. We don't have past issues, Ethan. You abandoned me when I needed you most, and I moved on with my life. Look, let's be practical. You've built an empire of nearly 26 million. I was your husband for 3 crucial years of your life. Legally, I could claim a part of that, but I'd rather reach a friendly agreement. Amelia's response was powerful. Ethan, you have no right to what I've built. You signed documents waiving any future claims when we divorced. Besides, everything I have, I built after you abandoned me. But that's where you're wrong, dear Amelia. I've consulted with specialized lawyers, and it turns out some of those divorce documents have legal loopholes that could benefit me, especially if you die without a clear will that specifically excludes me. Those words sent a chill down my spine. Ethan wasn't just planning to claim the inheritance after Amelia's death. He was threatening her directly, waiting for her to die. Are you threatening me, Ethan? Amelia's voice asked with a tone of disbelief. It's not a threat, it's a legal reality. But like I said, I'd rather resolve this civilly. If you give me, say, $4 million now, we can sign a document where I definitively waive any future claims. I will never give you a cent. And if you try anything legal, I assure you I will publicly reveal your true character and how you abandoned me when I was pregnant. Amelia, I don't think you're in a position to threaten anyone. Your illness is serious, and according to my medical information, you have a few months left to live. Think about it. 4 million now or legal trouble for your family after you're gone. The recording ended with the sound of a door slamming shut. Olivia explained that Amelia had kicked Ethan out of her office, but he had returned 2 weeks later for an even more revealing conversation. The second recording from February 14th was even more incriminating. In it, Ethan showed his true nature without any pretense. Amelia, I've been thinking about our last conversation. I've done more research into your financial situation, and I think I've underestimated your assets. My contacts in the financial sector tell me you could have up to 30 million in properties, investments, and cash. Ethan, I don't know how you got that information, but it's completely inappropriate for you to be investigating my private finances. Look, let's be honest. You're going to die soon, and that money is going to go somewhere. Your father is an old man who doesn't need that much money. I'm 45 and have my whole life ahead of me. We could make an arrangement that benefits everyone. An arrangement. Are you insane? Listen to me, Amelia. I can create a lot of legal problems for your family after your death. I have lawyers who can prove our divorce wasn't processed correctly in certain technical aspects. We can drag out the legal proceedings for years, freezing all your assets and ruining your family's reputation. Ethan, you're despicable. I can't believe I was ever married to you. I'm a realist, Amelia, but I'm going to make you one last generous offer. You give me 12 million now, and I guarantee your father will inherit the rest without any problems. If you refuse this proposal, I assure you I will fight for everything, and your family won't see a dollar of your fortune without going through years of legal battles. Amelia's voice on the recording sounded tired but determined. Ethan, you better hear me clearly. I will never give you anything. I have modified my will specifically to exclude you from any inheritance, and I have documented all your threats. If you try anything after my death, my family will have all the proof needed to show you're a shameless opportunist. We'll see, Amelia. We'll see who has the last word in this matter. Olivia stopped the recording and looked at me with a grave expression. Mr. Carter, after this second visit, Amelia asked me to immediately contact her lawyer James to modify the will. She also instructed me to keep these recordings in a safe place and give them to you if Ethan tried any legal action after her death. It was incredible. Amelia, even in her final days, had been protecting my future and her own from the clutches of this manipulator. The recordings not only prove Ethan's opportunistic intentions, but also his direct threats and his illegal knowledge of confidential financial information. Olivia, how is Ethan getting information about Amelia's finances? That's something else I found out, Mr. Carter. Last Tuesday, a bank employee contacted me discreetly. Apparently, Ethan had tried to bribe one of the tellers to get information about Amelia's accounts. The employee refused the bribe, but Ethan insisted several times during January and February. This added another crime to Ethan's record: attempted bribery and illegal access to banking information. With this new evidence, our case was not only solid for defending the inheritance, but we could also press criminal charges against Ethan. That night, I called James to tell him about the recordings. His reaction was one of total astonishment. Henry, with this evidence, not only are we going to win the case, but Ethan could face criminal charges for threats, attempted extortion, and illegal access to financial information. This completely changes our strategy. We're no longer playing defense. We're going on the attack. For the first time since Amelia's death, I felt that justice was on our side. My daughter, even from the grave, had managed to protect her legacy and give me the weapons necessary to confront this opportunist who thought he could take advantage of our pain. On April 15, 2023, the day of the first hearing at the River City Civil Court arrived. James and I arrived early, loaded with boxes full of documents, recordings, and testimonies. I wore my best black suit, the same one I had worn to Amelia's funeral, feeling that somehow she would be present in that room supporting me. At 10:00 a.m., Ethan entered the courtroom accompanied by his lawyer, Nathan Hale, and 3 people I didn't recognize. Ethan wore an impeccable gray suit and a look of false solemnity as if he were the victim in this whole affair. Judge Sophia Reyes, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for being strict but fair, opened the session by explaining the procedure. Ethan, as the plaintiff, would have the first opportunity to present his case. Nathan Hale stood up arrogantly and began his argument. Your Honor, my client, Ethan Hayes, was the devoted husband of Amelia Carter during the most formative years of her business career. During their marriage between 2011 and 2013, Ethan provided the emotional, intellectual, and logistical support that allowed Amelia to develop the ideas that would later lead to her millionaire success. Van continued with a completely distorted version of the facts. My client sacrificed his own professional opportunities to support his wife's business dreams. It was he who suggested the concept of fashion stores that combined American elegance with affordability. It was also Ethan who introduced her to key contacts in the retail sector, who later became Amelia's business partners. Hearing those blatant lies made my blood boil, but James had advised me to maintain my composure during the opposing party's presentation. Hale then presented his 3 witnesses. The first was Oliver Grant, who identified himself as a business consultant and claimed to have known Ethan and Amelia during their marriage. I worked with Ethan in 2012 developing the business plan for Amelia's fashion stores, Grant declared under oath. Ethan was the brain behind the business strategy. Amelia had the initial capital, but it was Ethan who designed the entire operational model. The second witness was Isabel Ford, who presented herself as a former business partner and supported the version that Ethan had been fundamental in Amelia's early business steps. The third witness, Lucas Dean, claimed to be an investor who had met Amelia through Ethan and had participated in the first rounds of financing for her stores. When these supposed witnesses finished their statements, James leaned into my ear. Henry, these people are clearly lying. Their testimonies are too coordinated and specific. We're going to unmask them during cross-examination. It was James's turn to present our case, and his strategy was brilliant. Instead of starting with legal arguments, he decided to play the recordings Olivia had saved directly. Your Honor, before we present our arguments, we want the court to hear the plaintiff's own words recorded during his meetings with the late Amelia Carter during the final months of her life. When the first recording from January 28th began to play, I saw Ethan's expression change completely. His face turned pale, and he began to whisper furiously in his lawyer's ear. Amelia's voice filled the room. Ethan, you have no right to what I've built. You signed documents waiving any future claims when we divorced. And then Ethan's revealing response. I've consulted with specialized lawyers, and it turns out some of those divorce documents have legal loopholes that could benefit me, especially if you die without a clear will that specifically excludes me. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Judge Reyes took notes intently as she listened to Ethan's explicit threats toward Amelia. When the part came where Ethan said, "Your illness is serious, and according to my medical information, you have a few months left to live. Think about it. $4 million now or legal trouble for your family after you're gone." I saw several attendees in the room exchange looks of disgust. James stopped the recording and addressed the judge. Your Honor, as you can see, the plaintiff not only admits he has no legal rights to the inheritance, but also acknowledges that he is taking advantage of the deceased's terminal illness to try to extort her. Nathan Hale immediately stood up. Objection, Your Honor. Those recordings were made without my client's consent and violate his right to privacy. Judge Reyes responded firmly. Overruled. The recordings were made on the deceased's private property, and the plaintiff was informed that the conversation was being recorded. Continue, Mr. Lawson. James then played the second recording from February 14th, where Ethan was even more explicit about his intentions. I can create a lot of legal problems for your family after your death. I have lawyers who can prove our divorce wasn't processed correctly in certain technical aspects. When the recording finished, James presented the notarized letter Amelia had written during her divorce, where she expressly excluded Ethan from any future claims on her assets. Your Honor, this document signed before a notary in September 2013 proves that the deceased was absolutely clear in her intention to exclude the plaintiff from any financial benefit. Furthermore, we have Amelia Carter's will drafted in December 2023, where she specifically names her father, Henry Carter, as the sole universal heir. But the most devastating blow came when James called Olivia Reed as a witness. Olivia, in a clear and firm voice, testified about Ethan's attempts to obtain financial and legal information about Amelia. The plaintiff tried to bribe me on multiple occasions to obtain confidential information about Amelia Carter's finances. He also attempted to bribe bank employees to illegally access the deceased's accounts, all while she was battling cancer. During the cross-examination of Ethan's witnesses, James masterfully proved that their statements were fabricated. When he questioned Oliver Grant about supposed business meetings in 2012, Grant couldn't provide specific addresses, exact dates, or documents to back up his claims. Can you show the court any invoice, contract, or document that proves your alleged collaboration with Mr. Hayes in 2012? James asked. Well, those documents were lost during a move, Grant replied nervously. How convenient, James retorted with irony when he questioned Isabel Ford about her supposed business partnership with Amelia. The woman also couldn't produce any documentary evidence. Worse, when James asked her about specific details of the fashion business, it became clear she knew nothing about the retail sector. At the end of the hearing, which lasted more than 5 hours, Judge Reyes announced that she would study all the evidence presented and issue her decision within 10 days. When we left the courthouse, Ethan approached me with a furious expression. This isn't over, Henry. I have the resources to appeal any adverse decision. I can keep this fight going for years. Ethan, I replied calmly, I think after what was heard in that room today, you should be more worried about criminal charges than the inheritance. His expression of fury turned to one of concern. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Ethan Hayes seemed to have understood that he had gravely underestimated the situation. The 10 days of waiting after the hearing were the longest of my life. James had warned me that although we had a solid case, the courts can sometimes be unpredictable, especially when so much money is involved. During that time, I decided to dig even deeper into the investigation of Ethan and his supposed witnesses. My first discovery came through my nephew Jack, who works in the IT department of a private investigation firm. I asked him to discreetly check the backgrounds of the 3 witnesses Ethan had presented. Uncle Henry, I found some very interesting things about these individuals. Jack told me during a family dinner, Oliver Grant has a history of false statements in other trials. In 2018, he was fined for perjury in a real estate fraud case in Coast City. The information about Isabel Ford was even more revealing. This woman is an amateur theater actress and has occasionally worked making false testimonies for money. There are records of her being paid $2,000 to testify in a divorce case last year. As for Lucas Dean, Jack discovered he didn't even have a license as a financial investor. He's a used car salesman who was fired from his last job for fraud. It seems Ethan specifically recruited people with questionable backgrounds to lie under oath. Armed with this information, I immediately contacted James. We need to present this evidence to the court before they issue the verdict. I said, Henry, this is perfect. We're going to request a supplementary hearing to present evidence of perjury. If we can prove that Ethan organized a scheme of false testimonies, he will not only lose the case, but he'll face additional criminal charges. On April 28, 3 days before the scheduled date for the verdict, Judge Reyes agreed to hear our new evidence. This time the courtroom was even more tense. Ethan and Hale arrived visibly nervous, especially after James had notified them about the nature of the evidence we were going to present. James began his presentation by showing Grant's criminal record. Your Honor, the plaintiff's first witness has a documented history of perjury. In 2018, a Coast City court ordered him to pay a $4,000 fine for false statements in a real estate fraud case. When he presented the evidence about Isabel Ford, Judge Reyes frowned with clear disgust. This person has taken money to make false statements in multiple court cases. We have invoices where she appears as a testimonial actress for amounts ranging from $1,000 to $3,000 per case. The most devastating information came when James proved that Lucas Dean had never been licensed as an investor. Your Honor, not only is this man not an investor, but he was fired from his job as a car salesman for trying to scam customers with falsified documents. But the final blow came when James presented bank records showing transfers from Ethan to the three witnesses in the weeks leading up to the hearing. Your Honor, we have evidence that the plaintiff paid $7,000 to Grant, $5,000 to Ford, and $4,000 to Dean exactly 7 days before their testimony in this court. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Reyes looked at Ethan with an expression of outrage I had never seen in a courtroom. Mr. Hayes, the judge said, addressing Ethan directly. Can you explain these bank transfers to people who later testified under oath in your favor? Ethan stood up, trembling, clearly unprepared to answer this evidence. Your Honor, those transfers were personal loans that have no relation to this case, personal loans of exact amounts to 3 different people who just happened to testify in your favor, the judge replied sarcastically. Hale tried to intervene. Your Honor, my client has the right to the presumption of innocence. Silence. Judge Reyes interrupted. This court will not tolerate attempts to manipulate justice through purchased testimony. Mr. Hayes has not only presented false witnesses, but has organized a deliberate scheme of perjury. The judge then did something that completely surprised me. She ordered the immediate arrest of the 3 false witnesses and summoned Ethan for a separate criminal hearing on charges of witness tampering and obstruction of justice. As for the main case, the judge continued, based on the evidence presented by the defendant, Henry Carter, this court finds that Mr. Ethan Hayes' claim is completely baseless and fraudulent. The judge proceeded to read her decision. First, the presented recordings unequivocally demonstrate that the plaintiff admitted to having no legal rights to the inheritance of Amelia Carter. Second, the deceased's will is absolutely valid and expressly excludes the plaintiff from any benefit. Third, the notarized letter from 2013 clearly establishes the plaintiff's voluntary waiver of future financial claims. Furthermore, the judge continued. This court finds that the plaintiff attempted to extort the deceased during her terminal illness, taking advantage of her vulnerability to obtain illicit financial benefits. The verdict was damning. The claim of Mr. Ethan Hayes is completely denied. It is confirmed that Henry Carter is the sole and legitimate universal heir of Amelia Carter. Furthermore, the plaintiff is ordered to pay all court costs and is fined $60,000 for presenting false testimony. But the judge wasn't finished. Finally, this court orders a criminal investigation to be opened against Ethan Hayes for the crimes of threats, attempted extortion, witness, tampering, and obstruction of justice. The plaintiff is forbidden from leaving the country until the criminal investigation is concluded. When the judge finished reading the verdict, Ethan was completely slumped in his chair. His face had lost all color, and Hale looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. As we left the courthouse, several journalists who had been following the case were waiting for us. James had prepared a brief statement. Justice has prevailed. Mr. Henry Carter has successfully defended his daughter's legacy against fraudulent attempts of appropriation. The memory of Amelia Carter remains intact, and her final will has been fully respected. That afternoon, in the quiet of my home, I reread Amelia's will for the 100th time. In one of its final clauses, she had written, "Dad, I hope you never have to use this document to defend yourself from unscrupulous people. But if that moment comes, remember that I built all of this thinking of your future and in honoring Mom's memory. Don't let anyone tarnish our family legacy." For the first time since her death, I felt that Amelia could rest in peace. Her final battle had been won, and her legacy was protected forever from the clutches of those who only saw money where they should have seen love, sacrifice, and honest work. The days following the verdict brought a flood of revelations that neither James nor I could have anticipated. The legal victory had opened the floodgates, and people who were previously afraid to speak out began contacting me with additional information about Ethan's true activities. The first to come forward was Elena Vargas, a 40-year-old woman who identified herself as Ethan's ex-girlfriend between 2017 and 2019. Elena called me on May 2nd, 4 days after the newspapers published the news of the verdict. Mr. Carter, I've been following the case in the news, and I think you need to know more about Ethan Hayes, she said with a trembling voice during our phone conversation. That man put me through a hell similar to what he did to your daughter. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in downtown River City, where Elena told me a story that chilled me to the bone. Ethan seduced me in 2017 when I had just inherited a property from my father. At first, he seemed like the perfect man, attentive, caring, interested in my well-being, but later I discovered that he had been investigating my financial situation before he even approached me. Elena continued to recount how Ethan had used the same manipulative tactics he tried with Amelia. During the 3 years we were together, he constantly pressured me to lend him money for his supposed investment projects. When we broke up in 2019, I discovered he had stolen $40,000 from my bank account using information he had gotten from me during our relationship. Did you file a police report? I asked. I tried to, but Ethan threatened to ruin my professional reputation if I took him to court. I work as a marketing director at a major company, and he knew people who could have caused me problems at work. In the end, I decided to consider that money the price of getting rid of him. But Elena wasn't Ethan's only victim. That same week, I was visited by Ricardo Soto, a 60-year-old retired businessman who had met Ethan at a poker club in 2020. Mr. Carter, that man is a financial predator, Ricardo told me during our meeting. He approached me at the casino posing as a successful investment consultant. He convinced me to invest $60,000 in a supposed investment fund that he managed. Ricardo showed me documents that proved how Ethan had created a shell company called Hayes Consulting Partners to scam older people with considerable savings. When I tried to withdraw my investment 7 months later, I discovered the company didn't really exist and that Ethan had used my money to cover his gambling debts. Did he also threaten you so you wouldn't file a report? I asked, suspecting the pattern. Exactly. He said he had contacts in the police force who could make my life difficult. He also blackmailed me with compromising photos he had secretly taken during a business meeting where I had had too much to drink. These revelations motivated me to look for more of Ethan's victims. I contacted a private investigator recommended by James Marco Vega, who specialized in financial fraud cases. Marco discovered that Ethan had been running a systematic scam operation for the past 9 years. Mr. Carter. This man has a very specific method. He researches vulnerable people or those in life transitions. Recent divorcees, widows with inheritances struggling, entrepreneurs, seniors with savings. Then he approaches them feigning romantic or professional interest to gain their trust and access their financial resources. Marco's report revealed at least 10 documented victims between 2013 and 2023, with total losses exceeding $500,000. Each case followed the same pattern: seduction, manipulation, extraction of money, and then threats to prevent reporting. The most disturbing part, Marco continued, is that Ethan keeps detailed files on his victims, compromising photographs, secret recordings, personal information that he uses to blackmail them if they try to get their money back. With all this information, James and I decided to contact the District Attorney's Economic Crimes Division to present a broader case against Ethan. The assigned prosecutor, Alan Torres, was extremely interested in the evidence we had collected. Gentlemen, what you're presenting to me is not just a case of fraudulent inheritance, but a systematic criminal operation that has been running for a decade. Prosecutor Torres told us, with the testimonies and evidence you have, we can prosecute Ethan Hayes for continuous fraud threats, blackmail, and racketeering. But the most shocking revelation came when Olivia contacted me again with information she had discovered while reviewing Amelia's files. Mr. Carter, I found something disturbing in Amelia's call logs from last year. During October and November of 2022, Ethan was not only calling her directly, but had also been contacting several of the store's clients and suppliers, asking about the financial health of the business. Olivia showed me a list of more than 15 business contacts that Ethan had tried to question about Amelia's finances. Some of these suppliers called me at the time to ask if they should give him information because Ethan was presenting himself as a family consultant hired by Amelia to evaluate the business. Did Amelia know about these contacts? Yes, Mr. Carter. That's why she tightened security measures at the company and installed the recording systems. Amelia suspected Ethan was planning something big, but we never imagined it would be so systematic and cruel. That additional information proved that Ethan had been planning his strategy to take the inheritance for at least 7 months before Amelia's death. He wasn't an impromptu opportunist, but a calculated predator who had been waiting for my daughter's moment of greatest vulnerability to execute his plan. On May 10th, Prosecutor Torres informed me that Ethan had been formally charged with 8 different criminal counts. Mr. Carter, thanks to your perseverance and the evidence you provided, we are going to prosecute this individual for all his crimes. The other victims you located have also decided to testify, so Ethan will face decades in prison if convicted. That night, as I organized all the case documents, I reflected on the true extent of Ethan's evil. He hadn't just been an opportunistic ex-husband trying to grab an inheritance, but a professional criminal who had turned the suffering of others into his way of life. Amelia, without knowing it, had become the victim who finally exposed Ethan's entire criminal network. Her courage to document his threats and her foresight to protect the evidence had not only saved our family inheritance, but had put an end to a decade of crimes against innocent people. On May 18, 2023, when it seemed the case was resolved and Ethan would finally face the consequences of his actions, I received a call that changed my perspective on everything I had experienced over these months. It was from cousin Mia Carter, a woman who identified herself as Amelia's second cousin and who lived in Baytown. Henry, I've been following Ethan's case in the news, and I think there's something else you need to know about Amelia's death, she said. Her voice choked with emotion. Her words sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean something else I'd rather tell you in person? Could you come to Baytown this weekend? It's about Amelia's last days in the hospital. The trip to Baytown was one of the most agonizing of my life. During the drive, my mind created increasingly terrible scenarios about what Mia might reveal to me. She worked as a nurse at Grace Hospital in Baytown, and although she hadn't directly cared for Amelia, she had contacts in the River City hospital system. We met at her apartment on Saturday morning. Mia, a 55-year-old woman with 25 years of experience in oncology, greeted me with a grave expression and medical documents in her hands. Henry, a colleague of mine from Central Medical Center in River City, contacted me after seeing the news about Ethan. She told me something that had been bothering her since Amelia's death, but she hadn't dared to report it until now. Mia showed me hospital visitor logs that her colleague had discreetly copied. According to these documents, Ethan visited Amelia in the hospital on 3 occasions during February, always when you were not present. The visits were on February 5th, 12th, and 19th. That's impossible, I replied immediately. Amelia had expressly forbidden me from allowing any visits from Ethan. Besides, I was practically living at the hospital during her last days. Exactly. That's why these visits are so strange. According to the records, Ethan presented himself as Amelia's legal husband and had forged documents that supposedly gave him authorization to visit her during the night shifts. Mia continued to explain what her colleague had observed. During the visit on February 19th, just 3 days before Amelia's death, Ethan was in the room for over 2 hours. The nurse on duty found it strange that Amelia was very agitated after that visit and that her vital signs had worsened significantly. Are you suggesting that Ethan might have, I couldn't finish the sentence? I'm not suggesting anything specific, Henry, but my colleague told me that Amelia asked her that night not to allow any more visits from Ethan and that she was very scared. She also mentioned something about not letting him force me to sign anything. Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. Had Ethan tried to force Amelia to change her will during her last days? Had he used her vulnerable state to pressure her while I wasn't there? Mia handed me a copy of the nursing notes from that night. They read, "Patient very agitated after family visit. Requests no more visits from husband. Mentions concern over legal documents. Mild sedative administered to calm anxiety." Henry, there's something else. My colleague checked the hospital's security cameras from that night. Ethan left the room carrying a folder he didn't have when he went in. I immediately called James from Baytown to inform him of these revelations. His reaction was one of total alarm. Henry, we need to investigate this immediately. If Ethan tried to coerce Amelia during her terminal illness to modify legal documents, we'd be talking about a much more serious crime. Get back to River City immediately. On Monday morning, James and I met with Prosecutor Torres to present this new evidence. The prosecutor immediately ordered all hospital security cameras to be reviewed and all staff who were on duty during Ethan's visits to be questioned. 4 days later, the prosecutor summoned us with information that surpassed our worst suspicions. Gentlemen, we have reviewed the security footage and confirmed that Ethan Hayes illegally visited Amelia Carter on multiple occasions using falsified documentation. The prosecutor continued. More seriously, we have found in Ethan's possession a copy of Amelia's original will with handwritten modifications that intended to include him as a beneficiary of 50% of the inheritance. These modifications are dated February 19th, the same day as his last visit to the hospital. Are you saying Ethan tried to forge Amelia's will, thus? I asked. Feeling outrage consume me. Exactly. We have evidence that Ethan brought forged documents to Amelia's room and tried to force her to sign modifications to the will. According to the nurse's testimony, Amelia flatly refused and threatened to report him, which would explain her agitated state that night. James intervened. Prosecutor Torres. This constitutes coercion of a sick person, forgery of documents, and possibly attempted murder if the stress caused contributed to Amelia's deterioration. Correct, Mr. Lawson. We have added these charges to the indictment against Ethan Hayes. He now faces the possibility of 30 years in prison. But the most shocking revelation came when the prosecutor showed us the full contents of the folder Ethan had taken from the hospital. In addition to the forged will, Ethan had prepared power of attorney documents that would have given him total control over Amelia's assets if she had survived in a vegetative state. What does that mean? I asked. It means Ethan had a backup plan. If Amelia didn't die immediately, he would have tried to declare her mentally incapacitated and assume control of her entire fortune as her caregiver husband. It was a Machiavellian plan designed to seize the $25 million regardless of whether Amelia lived or died. That revelation affected me deeply. For all these months, I had thought Ethan was simply an opportunist who had shown up after Amelia's death to claim money. Now I discovered he had been much worse, a predator who had been stalking my daughter during her final days, trying to take advantage of her extreme vulnerability to steal everything she had built. There's one more thing, Mr. Carter, the prosecutor continued. We found evidence that Ethan had been monitoring Amelia's health status through illegal contacts in the hospital system. He knew exactly when she would be most vulnerable and planned his visits accordingly. When we left the prosecutor's office that afternoon, James put a hand on my shoulder. Henry, I know these revelations are painful, but they also prove something very important. Amelia fought until the very end to protect her legacy and yours. Even in her final days, she stood up to Ethan and refused to give in to his pressure. That night, in the solitude of my home, I reread the letters Amelia had written to me during her illness one last time. In one of them, dated February 20th, just 2 days before her death, there was a line that now took on new meaning. Dad, if anything happens to me, make sure my will is respected. Don't let anyone manipulate what we've built together. Amelia had known exactly what Ethan was trying to do, and she had fought with her last breath to protect our future. Her courage and determination had not only preserved the family inheritance, but had exposed the true criminal nature of a man who had made the suffering of others his way of life. On June 15, 2023, almost 5 months after Amelia's funeral, the day of the criminal trial against Ethan Hayes arrived. The River City Criminal Court was packed with journalists, Ethan's victims, and curious onlookers who had followed the case through the media. Ethan arrived at the courthouse in handcuffs, escorted by 2 sheriff's deputies. His appearance had changed dramatically during the months he had spent in pre-trial detention. The arrogant, well-dressed man who had appeared at Amelia's funeral now looked haggarded with unkempt hair and an expression of total defeat. The presiding judge, a magistrate with over 20 years of experience in organized crime cases, opened the session by reading the 12 criminal charges against Ethan. continuous fraud, forgery of documents, threats, coercion, blackmail, witness, tampering, professional misconduct, and violation of court orders. Prosecutor Alan Torres began his presentation with a detailed chronology of Ethan's crimes over the last decade. Your Honor, the defendant Ethan Hayes is not an occasional criminal, but a systematic predator who has built his entire adult life by preying on vulnerable people. For the next 4 hours, the prosecutor presented testimonies from the 10 identified victims of Ethan. Each story followed the same gruesome pattern: seduction, manipulation, extraction of resources, and threats to prevent reporting. Elena Vargas testified in a firm voice. Ethan stole $40,000 from me using information he obtained during our intimate relationship. When I tried to get my money back, he threatened to destroy my professional career and leak private photographs he had taken without my consent. Ricardo Soto recounted how Ethan had created the shell company Hayes Consulting Partners to scam him. That man stole my life savings, $60,000 I had saved for my retirement. When I discovered the fraud, he blackmailed me with compromising photographs to prevent me from filing a report. But the most impactful testimony came from the nurse Carla Diaz, who had cared for Amelia during her final days. Carla testified about Ethan's illegal visits to the hospital and his attempt to coerce Amelia into changing her will. The defendant showed up multiple times using falsified documentation, identifying himself as the patient's legal husband. During his last visit on February 19th, Miss Amelia became extremely agitated. She specifically asked me not to allow any more visits from this man, saying, and I quote, "Don't let him try to make me sign anything again." The most devastating evidence came when the prosecutor presented the hospital's security footage showing Ethan leaving Amelia's room with documents he didn't have when he entered. The forged documents Ethan had prepared were also presented, including the modified will and the fraudulent power of attorney papers. Your Honor, the prosecutor continued, the defendant not only tried to appropriate an inheritance that did not belong to him, but he harassed a dying woman during her final days, taking advantage of her state of extreme vulnerability to try to steal $25 million. When it was the defense's turn, Ethan's lawyer, who had replaced Nathan Hale after he withdrew from the case, tried to present a defense based on temporary mental disorder and gambling addiction. Your Honor, my client has been battling a severe gambling addiction that led him to make desperate decisions. He is not a professional criminal, but a sick man who needs treatment, not prison. But this strategy fell apart when the prosecutor presented evidence of Ethan's meticulous planning. Investigators had found a complete file in his apartment with detailed information on all his victims, including photographs, financial records, and specific strategies to manipulate each one. Your Honor, Ethan did not keep organized files on his victims for 9 years. A gambling addict does not forge professional documents or create shell companies. What we have here is a professional criminal who has perfected his method over a decade. The most emotional moment of the trial came when I was allowed to read an impact statement as Amelia's father. With a trembling but firm voice, I addressed the court. Your Honor, Ethan Hayes not only tried to steal the money my daughter built with so much effort, he desecrated her memory, tortured her final days, and turned our family's grief into a legal nightmare. Amelia died thinking this man could destroy everything she had worked to protect. My daughter fought cancer for 6 months with extraordinary courage, but she also had to fight against the threats and blackmail of this predator during her most vulnerable moments. Ethan is not just a thief. He is someone who feeds on the suffering of others. After 3 days of testimonies and evidence presentation, the judge announced a 1-hour recess to deliberate. During that wait, James and I sat on the benches in the courthouse hallway surrounded by the other victims of Ethan who had come to witness the verdict. Henry James said to me, "Regardless of what the judge decides, we've already won the most important battle. Ethan will never be able to touch Amelia's inheritance, and his criminal network has been completely dismantled." When we returned to the courtroom, the judge began to read her verdict in a clear and firm voice. After reviewing all the evidence presented, this court finds the defendant Ethan Hayes guilty of all charges brought against him. The verdict was damning. The defendant is sentenced to 20 years in prison for continuous fraud, 4 additional years for forgery of documents, 3 years for threats and coercion, and 3 years for witness tampering for a total of 30 years of effective prison time. Furthermore, the judge continued the defendant is ordered to pay a total restitution of $750,000 to his victims plus court costs. The defendant is permanently barred from engaging in any activity related to financial consulting or wealth management. When the judge finished reading the sentence, Ethan collapsed completely in his chair. His lawyer tried to comfort him, but it was clear that the weight of his crimes had finally fallen upon him. As I left the courthouse, I was surrounded by Ethan's other victims, all expressing their gratitude for my courage in confronting him. Mr. Carter Elena told me, if you hadn't fought so hard for your daughter's memory, Ethan would still be free stealing from and threatening more innocent people. That night, as I had dinner alone at my house, I reflected on the 5 months that had passed since Amelia's death. The legal battle was over. Ethan would face decades in prison, and my daughter's inheritance was completely protected. But more importantly, Amelia's memory had been vindicated, and her legacy would remain intact forever. 6 months after the trial against Ethan on December 15, 2024, I was sitting in the office that had belonged to Amelia, surrounded by architects, lawyers, and representatives of charitable organizations. That day would mark the beginning of a new chapter in my daughter's legacy, one she had dreamed of, but that circumstances had not allowed her to see realized. During the months following Ethan's conviction, I had had time to reflect deeply on what to do with the $25 million inheritance Amelia had left me. At 65 years old, I didn't need that much money to live comfortably for the rest of my days. I knew that Amelia would have wanted her fortune to serve a purpose greater than my personal well-being. In her personal letters, which I had read countless times, Amelia had repeatedly mentioned her dream of helping women entrepreneurs who face difficulties similar to those she had experienced during her divorce. Dad, she had written in one of her last letters, if anything happens to me, I would like part of what I've built to help other women who are struggling to get ahead after being abandoned. With that inspiration, I had decided to create the Amelia Carter Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs. The foundation would be dedicated to providing interest-free loans, free legal advice, and emotional support to women who had been victims of spousal abandonment and wanted to start their own businesses. Olivia Reed, who had been Amelia's right-hand woman for years, had agreed to direct the foundation. Mr. Carter, she had said when I offered her the position, it would be an honor to continue Amelia's work in this way. She always said she wanted to use her success to help other women find their economic independence. The foundation's headquarters would be in the same building where Amelia had had her main offices. We had allocated $12 million as an initial endowment, which would guarantee the foundation's operation for decades. I would keep the other $13 million as a family reserve and for my own living expenses. During the inauguration ceremony, which took place exactly 2 years after Amelia's death, many of the people who had been important in her life were present. Grace Evans, her best friend since college, gave an emotional speech. Amelia was a woman who transformed pain into strength, adversity into opportunity. When Ethan abandoned her pregnant and without resources, she didn't just lament her situation. She channeled that experience into the determination to never again depend on anyone for her economic well-being. This foundation represents exactly what Amelia would have wanted to turn her personal story into hope for other women. James Lawson, who had been crucial throughout the legal battle, also spoke at the ceremony. I have seen many cases of disputed inheritances throughout my career, but I had never witnessed a fight as noble as the one Henry Carter fought to protect his daughter's memory. Amelia can rest in peace knowing that her legacy was not only preserved but has become a source of hope for future generations. But the most significant moment of the ceremony came when Elena Vargas, one of Ethan's victims, who now worked as a volunteer counselor at the foundation, read the first request for help we had received. Isabella Cruz, 30 years old, mother of 2, abandoned by her husband, after 10 years of marriage requests a loan of $20,000 to open a bakery and be able to support her children independently. It was exactly the type of case for which Amelia would have fought tooth and nail. In the following months, the foundation began to operate at full capacity. We received between 40 and 80 applications monthly from women all over the country seeking support to start their businesses. Our team of counselors, which included several of Ethan's victims who had decided to transform their experience into help for others, evaluated each case with the same care Amelia would have put into her own businesses. In February 2024, I received a letter that moved me deeply. It was from Isabella Cruz, the foundation's first beneficiary, informing me that her bakery had been a resounding success and that she had already been able to hire 3 additional employees. Mr. Carter, Isabella wrote, "You not only helped me financially, but you gave me the confidence to believe in myself again. When my husband left me, I thought my life was over. Now I know it was actually just beginning. Every loaf of bread I bake carries a piece of the hope that Amelia passed on to me through her foundation." In March, I received more news that filled me with satisfaction. Ethan had appealed his sentence, but the state Supreme Court had upheld the 30-year prison sentence. Furthermore, he had begun to pay restitution to his victims from prison, working in the prison's carpentry workshop. Henry, James informed me during one of our monthly meetings. Ethan has lost all his appeals. He will spend the next 30 years in prison, and when he gets out, he will be a 70-year-old man without resources or a reputation. Justice finally has completely prevailed, but beyond the satisfaction of seeing Ethan pay for his crimes. What truly filled me with peace was seeing how Amelia's legacy continued to grow. By the end of 2024, the foundation had helped more than 150 women start their own businesses, creating more than 600 indirect jobs throughout the country. Olivia regularly informed me about the progress of our beneficiaries. Mr. Carter, we have a 90% success rate in the businesses we've funded. This means that Amelia not only built her own fortune, but has helped create hundreds of small family fortunes across the country. In November 2024, 3 years after Amelia's death, I organized a Christmas dinner for all the people who had been important during this extraordinary journey. James Olivia Grace. Elena Ricardo and many of the foundation's beneficiaries gathered at my house to celebrate not just Christmas, but the triumph of justice and solidarity over greed and evil. During the dinner, I read aloud a paragraph from the last letter Amelia had written to me. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, but I want you to know that everything I built was with our family's future in mind and the possibility of helping others who go through the difficulties I experienced. Don't let sadness paralyze you. Use what I've left you to create something beautiful that honors Mom's memory and mine. That night, as my guests shared stories of success and hope, I looked at the photograph of Amelia that hung in the dining room and knew that she would be proud of what we had achieved together. Her death had been the end of her personal story, but it had marked the beginning of hundreds of stories of hope and overcoming adversity. Ethan Hayes had believed he could take Amelia's legacy through lies and manipulation. But what he hadn't understood was that my daughter's true legacy was not in the $25 million she had accumulated, but in her indomitable spirit, her generosity, and her ability to transform suffering into strength to help others. Amelia had won the final battle not only by protecting her inheritance from the clutches of an opportunist, but by turning that inheritance into a seed of hope for hundreds of women who, like her, had refused to surrender to adversity. If you like this story, hit the like button, subscribe to Inspirational Tales, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thanks for watching.